Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. Everything you see in this show today is in stock and ready for sale. Check out the description below for the SKUs and the references as well as the watch names, and reach out to Team Mosso at the1916company.com to start a conversation, even if it's just to ask about price. So today we've got one hell of a lineup, starting with a watch that can appeal to just about everyone, part of the 2023 Omega Summer Blue Series. This is the Seamaster Planet Ocean 600 meter 39.5 in steel. A really cool watch that features a dial made of zirconium oxide ceramic, vertically brushed with a fume fade. Check out those cyan blue tri-Arabic numerals, and then the indices that are two tones of blue to match. We've got a dial that matches its bezel in a case that's fit for any wrist. So if you like the style of the Planet Ocean, but you've only got the wrist for the Diver 300 meter, I've got great news. This wears even smaller than the 42 millimeter Diver 300 meter. Short across the wrist on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. You can see how well it wears. Now this is suitable for a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference. You can see how the bracelet bulges out on either side, even over the top, which exaggerates the width of a watch. You can see right here, these lugs are so far inboard of the edge of my wrist, I'm not even close to pushing the limit, and it's solid. If you believe a luxury watch should feel its price, I've got great news. This actually feels even more expensive than it is. The bezel is a 120-click unidirectional action, and there is no shortage of luminescence on this watch. You can see differential lume for the minute hand and the bezel pearl. They're green, so you can read them relative to each other at a moment's notice. I often find that dive bezels are more convenient and certainly cheaper to own in the long term than chronographs, and easier to read at that. The watch features a robust 3-link style clasp with many individual removable links. Inside, you can see we have a push-button micrometric slider with about 9.6 millimeters of incremental adjustability. Single fold twin trigger to point clasp, thick gauge steel. Underneath the case back, featuring the image of Poseidon, or King Triton, with not one, but two seahorses. We actually have the caliber 8800. So that is the movement you'll find in the Diver 300 meter. Coaxial, master chronometer, shock resistant, virtually amagnetic, protected down to 600 meters, hacking in a quickset. It is a very cool, durable, and accurate machine, and the watch has the helium escape valve you expect on modern Seamasters, not because you're a saturation diver, but because you imagine you may someday be. It's not necessary, but then again, luxury is often about getting more than you need and a very solid watch in the hand. Now, let's say you have a little bit more money for your full bracelet watch, but you don't want something as aggressively sporting. You like the look of steel with a blue dial. Well, we're going to shift gears entirely and head to Geneva and Patek Philippe. It's the 4947. This is a model that was launched in 2021, and it's very similar in many ways to the old reference 50. Do you remember the 5036? It was the 5035 with a moon phase. This is very similar to the earliest annual calendars that Patek launched back in the 90s. It is a little bit larger at 38 millimeters in diameter, in steel with the solid link bracelet. It's about 48 millimeters across the wrist, so this is not a ladies' watch by any means, but it is sort of a unisex option by modern sizing standards. Now, steel automatic, full bracelet, and yes, quite well loomed. This is almost a sports watch, and Patek now tells us that its 30-meter watches are rated to a true 30 meters. So maybe this has finally crossed over the divide to become an all-arounder that can do just about anything you can do. Taking a look at the dial, Patek's called this the vertical and the horizontal. They've also called it the shantung style, meant to imply that it is much like a Chinese rug. And it does have that texture and irregular spacing of the striations that makes it a little bit like weaving. We have gold hands, gold numerals, little gold indices outboard of those, leaf-style hands, annual calendar requiring only one adjustment during the jump from February to March. Throw it on the wrist. It's caliber 324 inside, which means a 45-hour power reserve, anti-magnetic hairspring, 6-position adjustment, and an extraordinary timekeeper. The movement is a combination of manual and machine finish that looks great, and frankly, seems to weigh heavier on the manual side than competing movements from Moser, Audemars Piguet, and Jaeger-LeCoultre. We'll take a look at that movement so you get a sense of it, but you know it well. Free sprung, automatic winding, unidirectional winding action, Spiromax hairspring, 6-position adjustment, and nicely decorated with the polished bevels being the most convincing element of the hand decoration, probably a final pass executed with a buffing tip on a drill bit guided by hand, but a really good looking movement. You can see the clasp is very modern, no more clamshells, twin trigger release. A lovely watch, really, for him and for her. I'm not going to pigeonhole it for one or the other. But let's say you do want to watch that is strictly a men's watch. I know that there are some people who, for reasons of political correctness, want to claim that there's no such thing as a man's watch or a woman's watch. But tell me with a straight face that a woman's going to wear this. I'm not saying she wouldn't want to. I'm saying it's not possible. 57 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, 16.2 millimeters thick, 45 in diameter, but my God, if it seems like it's bigger than that, I would be shocked if this actually measures 45. Count it as a 46, 47, and you got the right idea. But unlike a lot of big and boisterous watches, which are targeted at men who might have indiscriminate tastes, trending towards things that are bombastic but not fine, this watch proves you can be both. A manufactured product right down to the clasp, the hairspring, and the balance. This is from a company that makes its own movements. Yes, under Richemont, Roger Dubuis has become an RM competitor. And yes, the styles can be divisive, but there's a lot to love on this 2012 Excalibur Tourbillon skeleton, starting with the fact that it is as beautiful as it is brawny. We have this funny little skeuomorphic canteen-style crown, so you can have a properly proportioned crown and then the actual crown underneath that. So winding it up, you can see that the tourbillon is a flying tourbillon. There is no bridge on the top to block your view of that mirror-finished steel Celtic cross that acts as the second stand of the dial. You can see that the edges of those steel wings have been beveled and the tops have been mirror finished. The screws are both blackened and polished. And then we have the movement itself. Look at these half-frosted Dauphine hands. Look at this extraordinarily evacuated set of bridges and plates. Look at the keyless works, how finely beveled and satinated those steel parts are. You have this bridge that overlaps the minute wheel. You have the clutch spring, the clutch. You have the pull piece or setting lever, depending on whether you use British or American watchmaking terms. You can see the crown wheel and the winding pinion at play. Geneva hallmark, and you better believe it. This one has brains and brawn. I told you. It also has beauty. This watch is not just beefy and Geneva hallmark, but you can almost miss it. Look on the case back. It is a certified Swiss chronometer. Not a whole lot of companies that make horlogerie pieces are willing to submit to the COSC because they're afraid that they'll fall short where Tissot's and Mito's excel. Roger Dubuis, making every part of this movement itself, has no reservations. You can see engine turning, satination, even beveling on the interior structures of these skeletonized parts. 60 hours of manual wind power reserve, and yes, a certified chronometer. We've got an open barrel showing you the mainspring, and the watch is too big for me. I'm not going to pretend this fits my wrist. It doesn't. You're going to need a wrist of 18 centimeters circumference to wear this. If you ever wanted a chronometer, a tourbillon, Geneva hallmark, all Swiss made, and white gold to boot, a limited edition of 88 pieces, it's rare. This watch brings it all together for the man who has the style and the wrist to pull it off. And if you've ever wanted haute horlogerie, but you don't want to wear something that looks like a quarter on your wrist, game on. This is for the guy who has the infinitely large wrist. And here's something for the man or the woman who has a normal size wrist. So this is the Vacheron Constantin Traditionnelle Skelette. So when this was originally launched, it would have been the Patrimony Traditionnelle, but Traditionnelle now means Dauphine hands, and patrimony means baton hands. That's how you can always tell the difference. So in the current nomenclature, this is not a Patrimony Traditionnelle. It is just the latter. The watch features a fully skeletonized caliber 1120. This is the JLC 920 base, famously developed for and only ever used by the Holy Trinity. Now, of course, it's known as the 1120 SQ in this application, SQ for skelette. You could see that every surface has been hand skeletonized and then freehand engraved with all of the interior surfaces beveled. You could see an open and engraved barrel cover, half-frosted Dauphine, so you can read the watch fairly easily. And I often describe how this rotor system works on Royal Oak Jumbos and other watches that have this movement or a version of it. And I have to describe how the rotor is a full ring made of beryllium. You can see it wraps all the way around and then has a mass, in this case a mass and a skeletonized rotor on one side. And there are ruby roller bearings underneath it that I normally can't show you. But with the skeletonized watch, I can. The bearings are here, 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 and here. And they allow the rotor and the mass to be sunk super close to the bridges and plates, Fully supported all the way around, they can never come in contact and scratch the bridges or plates. It's a unidirectional winder, 5-position adjusted Geneva hallmark with a 40-hour power reserve and a free-sprung Gyromax style balance. 38 millimeters in diameter, 45.5 lug to lug, only 7.2 millimeters thick, because this movement is only 2.4 millimeters thick. Easy to wear, comfortable, it slides effortlessly under a cuff. It has a nice amount of weight for the size it is due to the white gold construction, but this is the Vacheron of your dreams, the no-compromise Holy Trinity leader that often shows its tail to both AP and Patek and proves to Lange that it does not have a monopoly on modern horlogerie finish. I'll even mention that this is one of the post-2012 examples. This was retailed in 2018, and we know it was made mid-2012 or later because you have Geneva hallmark on both movement and case, and that was a feature of Geneva hallmark watches made by Vacheron from about mid-2012 and later, so a really neat watch. If you want something that wears just as well on a smaller wrist but is an all-timer from a collectible standpoint, Daniel Roth 2147 Chrono. Now, the 2147 and the C147 were part of the same generation. This one is clearly a 2147, and the factory-filled paperwork with its full boxed set confirms that this is a 2147. In yellow gold, you can see it has the highly desirable multi-piece solid gold engine cut two-tone dial. So there are two different tones. It's easier to see in person than it is on the camera, but they are actually different shades, and it's very subtle. But you can see how the two different engine-turned parts are built up on top of each other, so it has an incredible degree of depth to it. Now, the watch uses a Lemania 2320 movement, which is the same that in slightly different form went to the moon as the Omega 321. The old joke is 321 blast off. That's how you remember the Omega caliber. That was the 2310. This is the 2310 upgraded to 2320 and then upgraded again by Daniel Roth. The 2320 was the version used by some companies to create an horlogerie version of the original architecture. And you can see, though it is a round movement, it's a perfect fit for this Ellipso Curvex case. 35.5 from lug tip to lug tip and about 40.6 from lug to lug and about 10 millimeters thick. The movement is gorgeous. Overcoil hairspring shaped by hand, 18,000 vibrations per hour, swan's neck regulator. A beautiful and exquisite feeling column wheel lateral clutch setup. Look at the beveling, look at the striping, look at the satination of the steel parts of the chronograph, the polishing of the screw heads. There's even a hairspring hooking guard under the regulator to prevent the overcoil from getting hung up on the regulator if shocked. 5-position adjusted manual wind. It's got a 48-hour power reserve. And like I said, this is one of the originals from the time when Daniel Roth himself was running the brand and designing these watches. Each represented his undilute vision of what a watch should be in what was then modern high horology. And this watch was part of a model line launched in 1990, the C147 generation. And this has pre-1995 hallmarks on it, which I will confirm right there. There's the little lady, no St. Bernard heads. So this was designed and made back when the man whose name is on the dial was also the man behind the design and the realization. An incredibly collectible piece of horological history. These are now, with the relaunch of the Daniel Roth brand, these originals from before he departed are being considered almost like brass movement era FP Journe. They're not as expensive yet, but a great opportunity for someone with the long view as a collector. Finally, I always like to end with a spectacular piece, and I debated ending with the Daniel Roth, but I think most folks would agree that when you have a GPHG Aiguille d'Or winner, that is Best Picture at the Oscars of watchmaking, that should probably be the final watch. And here it is. It's the MB&F Legacy Machine Sequential Evo Split Chronograph. So this is 44 millimeters in diameter in zirconium, which is lighter than steel, but also more scratch resistant. It's a lot like grade 5 titanium in look and feel. This is two chronographs in one 44 millimeter case, and because this is the Evo, it features a ring of rubber that isolates the movement from the case for superior shock resistance, and a screw-down crown that gives it 80-meter water resistance with a fully integrated rubber strap, so it is swimmable. It is even quite remarkably lumed, as I think we'll all agree that is a lot of luminescence. Everything is visible, including chronograph functions. Now, in theory, you're looking at two different chronographs that can operate independently. Watchmaker Stephen McDonnell helped Max Busser first on the legacy machine Perpetual in 2015, but then later on the Sequential Evo. And you can see right here the case back, 2 barrels and 2 drivetrains, but only 1 regulator. You can see that there is an escapement just below the balance. The balance is enormous, free sprung, slow beating with an overcoil, and with a full bridge to brace against shock. Now you can see how it towers above the dial, and that 1 regulator helps to power the 2 different chronographs. In isolation, the chronographs can be used the way you will see on a Longa double split. You have 2 different seconds dials and then 2 different 30-minute dials. So you can time 2 different intervals and run the chronographs independently of each other. Okay, that's fairly straightforward. Now, the way the twinverter works, it's this system right here that allows you to start them in perfect synchronization, stop them in perfect synchronization. But now here's where things get a little bit crazy. If I run one chronograph, while the other is stationary, and I hit the twinverter, it inverts the operation. The first one begins to tick and the second one stalls. So if I'm at a law firm and I am billing 2 different matters and I'm working on 2 different projects, I can transition from one to the other and precisely measure how much time I'm devoting to each matter, alternating back and forth instantaneously. And because this is a legacy machine Evo, it is remarkably wearable. So don't be scared by the 44mm size. Little things like the double camber, this crystal, you see how it has 2 different arcs, very steep and then more sloped to allow a cuff to ramp up over it. It's big, but it's light. It's water resistant. It's cambered, so the lugs are curved across the wrist. It's like an RM in that it's a big watch that wears easily. And you can see how a cuff really could slide up over the edge of that. Maybe not the tightest of dress sleeves, but certainly a jacket cuff. You'll also appreciate the fact that the watch has a full leaf spring GNF Chatelain style deployant clasp to keep it secure. The battle axe logo of MB&F, you'll see it again on the crown of the watch, and the finishing is surpassing. True to the original legacy machine of 2011, which introduced decoration inspired by Carrie Vacheron, this one, particularly on the structure of that balance bridge, leaves no stone unturned. This is the equal of what you will find at the Grubel 4Cs, the Langunheinas of the world. And the mechanism, one of the most complicated ever placed in a watch. 2022 GPHG Aiguille d'Or, and a watch that is self-evidently deserving of that honor. If you love this watch, reach out to Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase and pricing details. Some folks will ask, both of these are column wheel vertical clutch chronos. And check this out right here. You can actually see the engagement and disengagement of the vertical clutch. Plus, the vertical clutch shaft is actually jeweled, so there's a very minimal loss of balance amplitude when the chronograph is engaged. It is just full of innovations. Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase and pricing.